In the winter of 1894, an abandoned cabin stood silent in a forest until a small group of people took shelter inside. They expected warmth and rest. Instead, they awakened something terrifying that defied explanation. A horrifying discovery shocked a community and drew 1,000 people into a mystery that has never been solved. The following story contains disturbing details. Viewer discretion isn't just advised, it's required. Camilla, Ontario. Today, there's little to mark this tiny, nearly forgotten settlement between Primrose and Orangeville on Highway 10. Drive through and you might not even realize it exists. Northwest of the intersection, a small patch of woods sits on private property. It was here that the strange events began. Back in the 1890s, this area was deep forest. And within those trees stood an infamous structure, the Bonesetter's cabin. The building was constructed around 1845 and earned its name from its most well-known resident, Irish Dr. Robert Frame. If you broke a bone, Dr. Frame was the man to see. No one in Dufferin County was said to be a finer bonesetter. Dr. Frame and his wife moved into the cabin around 1875. 10 years later, Dr. Frame's wife died. The aged doctor lived there alone until the early 1890s when he sold the property and left. For the next few years, the cabin sat vacant. It was a simple one-story log structure, 24 feet long, 18 feet wide, and 12 feet high. A small attic could be accessed from inside, and a lean-to passage entrance extended from the south side. In 1894, a man named David McNaughton acquired the property and likely built the main farmhouse. Dr. Frame's small cabin remained standing, and seeing an opportunity, McNaughton tried to rent it out several times, but no tenant stayed for long. They all complained of strange disturbances, unsettling noises from the attic that kept them awake at night. Whatever was making the sounds, they were certain of one thing: it was not an animal. By December, McNaughton had rented the main farmhouse on the property to Michael Heffron. Heffron, however, wanted nothing to do with the Bonesetter's cabin. That same month, a woodcutter named Adam Glover arrived to work in R.J. Hewitt's bush, a nearby forested area. He and his wife needed a place to stay. Heffron offered them the abandoned cabin, rent-free. It was an offer too good to refuse. Adam Glover, his wife, and 4 fellow woodcutters, Robert Delaney, Samuel Buchanan, R. Nickel, and Dave Hunter, moved in, partitioning the space with curtains for privacy. From sunup to sundown, Glover and his crew felled trees in Hewitt's bush, hauling the timber to a nearby mill. After a long day's work, they returned to the cabin where Glover's wife prepared a hot meal. Afterwards, exhausted, the men would collapse into their curtained bunks. first, the men assumed the sounds were the log walls of the cabin expanding and contracting from the shifting temperatures, cold at night, warm from the wood stove by morning. During the day, while the men were cutting trees, Mrs. Glover was left alone in the cabin. But she wasn't alone. Something in the attic dragged itself around. When the men returned, they found Mrs. Glover beside herself with fright. But like her husband and the others, she had no choice. The cabin was her only shelter from the winter cold. Then, a few nights later, violent pounding shook the cabin door, jolting everyone awake. Adam Glover leapt up, expecting the late arrival of some workers due earlier that day. But before he could reach the entrance, the hammering came again, harder this time. Then, before his eyes, the door flew open and slammed shut on its own. Heart pounding, Adam yanked the door open. Outside, the ground was blanketed in fresh snow, completely undisturbed. No footsteps, no visitors, no wind, only silence. Every night, the sounds returned. As before, most of the noises came from the attic, the same eerie disturbances reported by previous tenants. With a lamp to guide them, Glover and his fellow woodcutters searched the cramped, shadowy attic. But something unseen kept snuffing out the flame, and it wasn't a draft. They found nothing but heavy, suffocating darkness. Things took a turn for the worse. Outside, in the moonlit woods, strange entities flitted between the trees. Silent, shadowy figures that left no tracks in the snow. Then something even stranger. A few nights later, an ominous three-pronged light appeared just outside the Glovers' cabin window. It hung motionless in the air for nearly 8 minutes, then vanished. Another night, Dave Hunter stepped outside and froze in disbelief. A massive ball of fire floated in the air. Shouting for Bob Delaney, they watched as the glowing sphere drifted slowly around the corner of the cabin. The two men followed, staring in stunned silence as it rose higher and higher into the night sky, until it disappeared. Inside, the unseen force grew stronger. The sounds escalated. Objects began to move. Chairs slid across the floor. Beds tipped over on their own. The entire cabin trembled. The vibrations became so intense that flakes of whitewash rained down from the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. The Glovers and the Woodcutters were nearing their breaking point. Mrs. Glover's sister, Mary Ann Noble, a staunch skeptic when it came to ghosts, arrived for a visit. But after just one night in the cabin, she left with a very different belief. Word of the terrifying ordeal spread quickly. The Orangeville Sun got wind of the strange happenings and sent reporters to investigate. The Glovers gave them full access to the cabin and the surrounding land. The journalists searched every room, every cupboard. They scoured the attic. They found nothing. But then they turned their attention to the long passage entranceway. In a dark, cluttered corner at the far end, in the dust and shadows, hidden in plain sight, sat a collection no one had noticed. A large wooden box, and inside it was filled with human bones. Among them, a remarkably well-preserved human arm. But that wasn't all. Scattered around were old bottles and jars, their contents disturbingly intact. Amputated limbs, severed hands, fingers, pieces of tissue and organs. Some were identifiable, others utterly unrecognizable. The realization sank in. The Glovers and the Woodcutters had been living among human remains. News of the grisly discovery quickly swept through the community. The body parts were assumed to have belonged to Dr. Frame. Reporters gathered the specimens and took them back to the Orangeville Sun office, where a local doctor examined them. His verdict was indisputable. They were all human, and they were all from different people. Instead of keeping the find under wraps, the newspaper made a bold decision. They put the bones on display. Over the next few days, 1,000 locals lined up for a glimpse. Yet, even as the town buzzed with speculation, the eerie disturbances at the Bonesetter's cabin continued. The Glovers and the Woodcutters had endured enough. They left. But in their place came thrill-seekers and ghost hunters, drawn by the legend now surrounding the cursed cabin. Each night, crowds gathered at the dwelling to watch and listen. They weren't disappointed. The activity persisted. The floor trembled beneath their feet, and audible bangs were heard. More bones surfaced and were gathered up and taken back to Orangeville. Rumors swirled. Had Dr. Frame been collecting body parts rather than properly disposing of them? If so, why? People wanted answers. The old doctor, now in his 90s, was eventually found living with his nephew a few miles away on Center Road. When questioned, Dr. Frame had no explanation for the strange events at his former home, but he did clarify a few things. Before leaving the cabin, he had intended to take his collection of medical specimens, including a complete human skeleton wired together for study, but his nephew refused, so the preserved remains were left behind. According to Dr. Frame, the skeleton had been stored in the attic. Yet that only deepened the mystery, because the attic had been confirmed empty after numerous searches by various people, including Glover and the Woodcutters. Bones had been found in a box in various places around the cabin, but no intact skeleton wired together was ever recovered. Had it been disassembled or stolen? No one knew. Eventually, the Orangeville Sun decided it was time to lay the bones to rest. They were given a proper burial in one of Orangeville's cemeteries. No marker was placed. Their location is unknown. And not long after, the strange activity at the cabin faded away. People eventually lost interest. The Bonesetter's cabin was abandoned once more, and whatever dwelled there was left to itself. What really happened in the Bonesetter's cabin? The human mind is a complex and suggestible instrument. Fear, expectation, and group dynamics often shape paranormal experiences. When the Glovers and the Woodcutters moved into the cabin, they may have already heard the rumors, stories of eerie noises and unseen forces experienced by the former tenants. Primed with expectation, even the most mundane sounds, a shifting log, a rodent in the attic, the wind against the walls could trigger a psychological response. Fear is contagious. One person's unease can spread like wildfire, turning ordinary sounds into something unexplainable in the minds of a group. The Woodcutters spent their days cutting trees, hauling logs, and enduring back-breaking labor. Sleep was already a luxury. The persistent nightly disturbances meant they were suffering from extreme exhaustion, a state that can lead to paranoia, a heightened sensitivity to sound and movement, and hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid, dreamlike visions occurring between wakefulness and sleep. Low-frequency sound waves created by wind passing through hollow spaces or trees may have produced infrasound, which has been linked to feelings of dread and even hallucinations in some people. By the 1890s, formalin, a solution of formaldehyde in water, became a widely used preservative in medical and scientific fields. Prolonged exposure to it can cause dizziness, paranoia, and even hallucinations. If traces of Dr. Frame's chemical still lingered in the cabin, could toxic fumes have affected the mental states of its occupants? When water seeps into the ground and freezes, it expands, building up intense pressure beneath the surface. If that pressure becomes too great, the frozen earth cracks violently, producing explosive sounds that can echo through the forest like gunfire or distant thunder. Vibrations from a frostquake could have traveled through the ground, rattling walls, making it feel like something was inside. Tremors from a frostquake could have been strong enough to shake the cabin, causing walls to break, beds to rattle, and loose objects to move. On cold winter nights, tiny ice crystals in the air can refract and reflect light, creating strange visual effects. Moonlight or the northern lights could produce tall vertical beams or multi-pronged lights, distorting reality just enough to create something truly unrecognizable. Snow-covered ground and ice-coated windows can bend and split light sources in unusual ways. Winter thunderstorms, known as thundersnow, can occur in regions near large bodies of water, such as southern Ontario, which is surrounded by the Great Lakes. If lightning is present, ball lightning could theoretically form. This bizarre and little understood phenomenon appears as a floating, glowing sphere. It may hover, drift unpredictably, or vanish without a trace. Is this what happened? A confluence of natural and environmental factors? Or is it possible that something truly strange occurred? Some believe that physical locations can absorb and replay past events like a recording. Stone tape theory suggests that materials like limestone, quartz, and granite can somehow record strong emotions or traumatic events, which later replay as ghostly phenomena. Dr. Frame was a bonesetter, a healer. But in the 19th century, rural doctors often performed desperate surgeries in dimly lit cabins, amputating limbs without proper tools or anesthesia. If the pain and suffering of his patients left behind a psychic imprint, did the cabin itself become a conduit for supernatural activity? The sounds of knocking, banging, and ghostly footsteps, could they be a recording of past horrors playing on a loop? Dr. Frame claimed to have left a fully articulated skeleton in the attic. Yet when the cabin was searched, it was nowhere to be found. Had it been stolen while the cabin sat vacant for 3 or more years? Or had it been scattered by persons unknown, its bones dispersed around the property, explaining the fragmented remains found later? That raises another unsettling question. Where did Dr. Frame acquire a human skeleton in the first place? In 19th century Canada, criminals hanged at the gallows weren't always given proper burials. Sometimes, a quiet arrangement was made. A few coins exchanged hands, the body vanished, and no one asked questions. So whose skeleton was left behind in the attic? A convicted murderer? A violent criminal? Did their malevolent spirit haunt the cabin? If the skeleton had been scattered, had something else been broken? An unspoken agreement with the dead? Many believe that hauntings can occur when human remains are moved, desecrated, or improperly handled. Some believe the spirit in the Bonesetter's cabin was never truly appeased. Yes, bones were gathered and buried, but not all of them. Some were lost. Some were left to decay, trampled underfoot, and some were likely stolen. One grim detail stands out. No newspaper account mentions a skull being found. Had one been discovered, the journalists of the time who reveled in the macabre would have surely seized upon the detail. What happened to it? Does the skull sit now in another hidden collection, tucked away on a dusty shelf, or is it still there somewhere, in those woods, buried by time? In the end, the story of the Bonesetter's cabin is more than just a haunting. It's a meditation on disintegration, on what it means to be scattered, forgotten, and erased by time. Perhaps the true nightmare in this story isn't the knocks in the attic or the fireball in the trees, but the deeper, existential dread that lingers beneath it. What will happen to us when we are gone? Will we be remembered? Or will time reduce us to dust? Our names fading, our gravestones weathering to blankness, our very bones lost to the indifference of history. Perhaps that is the ultimate horror, that no matter how much we build, how deeply we carve our names into the world, time will break us apart and scatter us. What is certain is that the Bonesetter's cabin eventually crumbled, its timbers claimed by the earth. A lingering echo of what awaits us all. If you've enjoyed this journey into the eerie and strange, consider clicking subscribe and notifications. Your likes and comments are greatly appreciated and will help keep this channel alive and growing. And if you know of a strange story from your area of Canada, maybe buried deep in the past in your community newspaper archives, let me know, and I'll consider adding it to the lineup of upcoming episodes. Thanks for watching, and remember, strange stories don't die. They wait to be found.